Okay, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about one last topic related to these market structures. And this topic is called price discrimination. So price discrimination is basically charging, it's not charging all customers the same price. This is not discrimination in the sense that you often hear the word discrimination. In fact, you might, when you see the examples, you might not actually think these examples are unfair, which the word discrimination usually has this context of unfair, but it's just that they charge two different prices to two different groups of people. Okay, and so this is actually common, um, in most cases not illegal, and in most cases actually people agree with this practice. So wait until you see it a little bit later. So there's not one price for all customers. So they charge different prices for different customers is the idea. Now, who might do this? Well, oligopolies might do this. A monopoly might do this. Perfect monopolistic competition might do this. The one case that will not do this is perfect competition. So perfect competition, this doesn't tend to be there just because of the nature of those markets, and the individual firms would have no incentive to do that because they're just price takers anyways. Okay, so but in the other three market structures we talk about, this would happen. So they must have market power, right? They must be an extent. They must have market power to do this. They're not a price taker. Okay, so. Um, so what is price discrimination? Well, it can be, we have two kinds, and so we'll first talk about one is that the direct kind. So with direct price discrimination, so do direct, you can separate the customers by some variable. Okay, so there's some variable that can help you to separate your customers. It has to be something you can actually identify and verify. So common ones, age, location, status. Okay, so for example, you're a student. Okay, so actually, if some of you might get the student discount, and you might be happy that you get it. Did you serve in the military? Right? So these are something they can use to separate people, because they can actually identify them. So in the case of location, it's just where they're at when they're buying it. Um, and also online, they use, so this could be a physical location. They often online, they use your IP address to do a price discrimination based on where you're at. Okay, and sometimes you just can't buy the product, especially if it's like an online service. It just won't be available to you if you don't live in certain markets, for example. And they also use your student status, your military status, your age to separate you from other customers. Needs a second thing for this to be successful. So you can imagine, if we had, for example, you can get a 30% discount on cars for being a student. Well, what might be the problem? Well, you would probably get students who would go buy cars and resell them and buy cars and resell them. They could maybe get around this with a numerical limit on how many cars you can buy. But even then, you might just go buy one really expensive car and then resell it and then go buy a cheap car with the profit you made. Okay? So you need to be able to prevent reselling. If there's not a way to prevent the reselling, then if there's lots of reselling, you'll get what they call arbitrage. So people will go into this market and buy the good cheaply, and then they'll sell it in another market where it's more expensive. Okay, so this is the idea. So we need to do this direct kind. We need this to be able to prevent reselling. This tends to be easier with services, right? Because services, you actually have to be there to receive them. So services, this tends to be easier. With goods, you don't see this kind of direct discrimination as much, except for with location. Okay, so for example, they might sell a good for a different price in different countries. And with the knowledge that there will be some reselling, but that the reselling will be relatively difficult to do, especially if the good is heavy. They also sometimes make small differences in the product to make it not transport well to other countries. One of those might be, they specify it for the local cell network, for example, so then it won't work on a network. So then what's the benefit of doing this? Well, they can sell to more people than if they only charge one price. And they can get more profit from doing this. They can also get more profit. I'll show you the graph for the profit in the next video. So they also get more profit. Okay, so they can sell to, right? So they can get a higher price, like the price they would have charged before to maximize profit, to the customers who have a high value customers, meaning not the customers themselves have a high value, but they have a high value for this good, and then they can get a discount to those with less willingness to pay, and it allows them to reach both groups, but it allows them to reach the people with low willingness to pay without lowering the price to those who have a high willingness to pay. This is the basic idea. Okay, so what are some examples of this? Okay, let's go through some examples. Movie tickets, and you could think of a whole bunch of examples, I'm sure. Movie tickets, right? We have student, we have child, we have time of day, right? Matinee, and I believe we have senior. Okay, and I don't know if there's any other, but anyways. So again, time of day as well. I should have put that. That's another variable you could use. You could also use time of day. So actually go back up here and add, time. Right, time is also a factor. So because the demand will be different in different times of day, different days of the week, even in different seasons, right? So for example, time. Another thing, restaurant. They you usually have a child menu, a senior menu, and those are price discrimination. They're giving a discount to children. So actually, I don't know if you ever take kids to a restaurant, but some restaurants, the child's menu are pretty big. In fact, an adult that doesn't want to eat too much would be perfectly happy with some things on the child menu in certain restaurants. But they're not going to let you order off them if you're not a child. And it's because it's not just smaller portions or different selections of food, it's also cheaper in most cases. Okay, in most cases they're getting a discount, and they do this because they know that you might not be willing to bring your kids to the restaurant, or you might not eat out as much if your kids had to pay full price, so they give them a discount. We also have, like, in some places we have the early bird special or happy hour. Okay, these are examples of discounts at specific times, okay, to try to attract customers in, and it has to do with the guessing there's a difference in their willingness to pay. Let's see another one. Textbooks, they do this by country. So, for example, in other countries, you can buy the same textbooks you buy in the U.S., but way cheaper. So sometimes, a textbook that might be $200 in the U.S., you maybe could buy for 50, 60 bucks in Europe or in Asia. So how do they do this? How do they prevent reselling? Well, they in this case, they do the international version. And the international version is usually the same book, but with a different cover. And sometimes they have different practice problems inside and things like that. So in case the teacher is using those, then it won't work very well for the student. Sometimes they're exactly the same. Okay, so but they make them look a little different, and they call them the international version, and this seems to prevent people from being willing to buy them when they're shopping online. And they do the same thing. So we also do with pharmaceuticals. Okay, so this can also be done by country, and in this case, the law prevents us from importing. So law prevents the imports. At least in many cases, the law prevents the import. So these are all some examples, and these are all direct. Final one, financial aid. So one way to look at financial aid is it is a price discrimination. So financial aid is a way to give a discount to students who may have less money or less ability to pay, and it gives them this discount and makes them more willing to enroll in the school. Okay, and so from that perspective, you can think of financial aid. So like I said, these things are pretty normal, and except for probably the textbooks and the pharmaceuticals, none of these things do you think are super unfair, but they are common. So when I hear the word discrimination, it doesn't necessarily mean it's something bad. In fact, in some ways, it allows the customer to reach the people with the most willingness to pay, and to reach the people who are not quite as willing to pay but still want the good. It allows them to reach both groups, which can be a good thing for both sides.